Okay, I believe that we are recording at this time. It's a very interesting class that we're having. Reminds me of what a teacher once shared with me that he had when he was in yeshiva, there was a Rebbe who would begin teaching. He'd just look at his books. He wouldn't pay attention to anybody in the class, just start teaching, talking, and never seemed to notice anybody. So one day the students decided to play a trick on the teacher. And there were three of them in the class, and slowly each one walked out of the class, just excused himself, until eventually there was nobody sitting in the class. They wanted to see if the teacher would notice, and he didn't. He just kept on talking, and as if the class was paying attention. So there's a little bit like that, where I'm talking to myself, but it's recording. Hopefully, it's all working so that people will be able to follow this last daf in chapter 2, and then we'll have finished chapter 2. And when we pick up after Pesach, we will pick up with chapter 3, which is a great chapter, at least from my perspective, because I love the Agada and the Midrash, and there's some really, really interesting stories. Without simple happy moral endings, just kind of odd. And it'll be really interesting to talk about the meaning of those stories. But we got to finish this chapter first. So here we go. We finished at the very end of 17b last time. And we begin now with this new section, a marmar. So we're going back to teaching in the Mishnah. Mitmanya be ad sof hamoed. Lamalil ad sof hamoed. So if you remember, we learned that there are a number of holidays. We no longer observe them, but they were once upon a time mini festivals that you would observe in the rabbinic world, or the Second Temple world. They were included in a book known as Megillat Ta'anit, not tractate, not Masechet Ta'anit, what we're studying, but rather Megillat Ta'anit. And in this text of which announced days that not only fast days, but days that you didn't fast, so that had many holidays. There are a whole bunch of holidays, days of celebration. And one of them was and on these days, we were told sometimes there were no eulogies, which meant no fasting or no eulogies on these days, and sometimes just no fasting, but you could eulogize. So one of the passages that the Mishnah mentioned is from the 8th of Nisan, and we're getting close to that day, until the end of the festival of Passover. The festival of Shavuot was restored, and it was decreed not to eulogize. If you remember, the story was that the Baitusim was another sect of Jews at the time that was different from the Pharisees. They believed that they held that when the Torah says that we begin counting towards Shavuot the day after Shabbat, they actually started counting the day after Shabbat. After the Shabbat after Pesach, they would start counting the day, that Sunday, the 50-day period. The Pharisees, the rabbis, insisted that that what the Torah meant when it used the word Shabbat there, it meant the festival itself, which is what we do to this day. We start counting the Omer, the 50 days, the day after, on the second night of Pesach, which means that the holiday is going to come at all different times. If every year it starts on Sunday, then Shavuot is always going to fall on the same day. This was a big argument, and this mini festival or celebration period from the 8th to the end of festival celebrates I guess the Pharisees were able to win their argument against the Baitusim. And so therefore, Shavuot was restored to the 50th day after Pesach, according to the Pharisees. So, what I meant, we forgot to say is that in the Mishnah, it mentions that on these days when there is no eulogizing and no fasting, it's not only on these celebratory days that we don't do this, but actually the day before the holiday, because in order to strengthen and the rabbinic decision that these are worthy holiday days. You don't have to do that on or for the day before Shabbat, the day before Pesach. You don't, because those are biblical holidays. People aren't going to eulogize. They're not going to fast on these biblical holidays everybody knows and everybody observes. But for the rabbinic ones, which not everybody is necessarily going to buy into, they made it even stricter, or strict in the sense that you didn't fast or eulogize the day before. So now this is where we get into our issue. So from the 8th of Nisan until the end of Pesach, it was decreed not to eulogize nor to fast. And the Gemara asks, Lema Adamoid, why do I have to say until the end of the festival? Didn't let it say until the festival, because you're not allowed to eulogize or fast on Pesach anyway. And Rav Papa, Amar Rav Papa, Kida Amar Rav Lo Nitracha. Rav Papa said that no, you have to, because he's following Rav, you have to, it's necessary to mention this, the fact that you're not fasting or eulogizing over Pesach, Ela la'asor yom shelefanav, because you want to prohibit the day before. All of this is going on before the holiday. So here too, although in this case, here too, it's necessary to mention Pesach. So that was the previous conversation we had. With the 1st of Nisan through the 8th of Nisan, we were celebrating another mini holiday. And there, Rav had mentioned you needed to mention the first day of Nisan, which is, of course, Rosh Chodesh, because you want to emphasize also that the day before Rosh Chodesh. We had a conversation about that. Now they're saying that likewise here, we mentioned Pesach because we want to make sure you prohibit eulogizing and fasting the day after Pesach. Okay. Who holds like this? Because in the Mishnah, the unattributed opinion, which is usually the majority, held it's only the day before. But there is an opinion that says the day after, you're also restricted from fasting and eulogizing, and that is Kiv Rabbi Yossi. For Rabbi Yossi taught, Damar, Bein lefanav uvein lacharav asur. Okay, so he says it's prohibited before and after. Ihachi be'esrim v'tisha nami. My irya dehave yoma demikame yoma demitokam tamida. So he says, it was Rabbi Yossi who said that eulogizing is prohibited both the day before and the day after these festives mentioned in Megillat Tanit. But the Gemara then asks, going back to that previous conversation, if so, with regard to the 29th of Adar too, why did we state specifically that eulogizing is prohibited then? Because it's the day before the day on which the daily offering was established. Because, by the way, there was already a holiday on the 28th of Adar. We didn't know this before in our previous conversation, but now they're letting us know there is a mini holiday on the 28th of Adar, which means that this whole conversation that we had to justify fasting the day before, not fasting, the day before the 1st of Nisan. Why didn't you just tell us? You could have told us before. It's like you're held by Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi holds the day after as well. The 28th is a mini holiday, which we'll find out in a moment. And so we didn't have to go through this whole discussion of trying to justify not fasting or eulogizing the day before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. You could have just told us, hey, there's a holiday on the 28th and you don't do it afterwards and we're holding like Rabbi Yossi. So here's the explanation of this the holiday on the 28th. The Tanya. Besrim ve'ut manya be'achat basorta tavta lehuda'ei de la yi'idun min oraita. On the 28th day of Adar, good tidings came to Jews that they would not be restricted from Torah study, and they declared this day a commemorative day. The Baraita then explains what happened. Why was it such a good day? What was the good news? Shapam achat gazra malchut harisha'a shmad al Yisrael shelo yesku b'Torah v'shelo yamulo et b'neihem v'sheyichalelu Shabbatot. So they forbade study of Torah. This is the Romans, circumcising children in a brit milah, and they were forcing people to break Shabbat. Me'asa Yehuda ben Shemua v'chavirav. So what did they do? How did they respond? Yehuda ben Shemua and his colleagues went and sought the advice mimatronita achat shekol gedolei romi mitzuyin etzla. They went and sought the advice of a certain Roman matron whose company was kept by all the prominent people of Rome. Now, here he tells us that matrona is from the Aramaic form of the Latin, meaning a woman, especially an important woman. I can't help but wonder, and many women of the noble class admired the Jews. It's actually very true. A lot of women, at least according to some of the early Roman sources, they were irritated because supposedly a lot of women converted to Judaism during this period. So that's his explanation. I just can't help but wonder the term Shekol Gedolei Romi Mitzuyin Etzla, whose company was kept by all the prominent individuals of Rome, maybe a matrona is something else. In any case, she was a prominent person. She knew the important people, and she gave them advice. Amra lahem imdu v'hafginu balayla. Arise and cry out. Today, lahafgin is to demonstrate, but according to Steinsaltz here, he says it has to do with Persian verbal stem, which means to cry out. Rise and cry out at night. Halchu v'hivginu balayla amru ishamayim lo achim anachnu lo b'nei av echad anachnu lo b'nei em achat anachnu. They cried out to God, "Oh heaven, are we not brothers? Are we not children of one father? Are we not the children of one mother? Ma nishtanenu mikol umma v'lashon she'atem gozrin aleinu gezerot ra'ot." So, how are we different from any other nation in tongue that you single us out and issue against us evil decrees? So interesting. It's not that they're crying out to the Romans, begging them, demonstrating against them, please give us, stop doing this to us, but rather it's to God. Why are you doing this to us, God? Uvitlu, and it was effective because the authorities nulled the decrees. So whether it was the Romans who heard it, or whether it was the God who turned things around, and because they annulled this terrible decree of not being able to study Torah or Brit Milah or Shabbat, they made it a celebratory day. So now we get back to this issue. Amar Abai lo nitzracha ela lechodesh me'ubar. So since the 28th of Adar is also a commemorative day, according to the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, you were prohibited to fast on the following day, the 29th, and that's the answer. But Abaye says, why was it, the question therefore remains, why was it necessary to list the new moon of Nisan when the day was already prohibited, right? Because you didn't have to prohibit, you didn't have to list the new moon, right? Because again, on holidays, you don't need to fast. You don't need to make the restrictions. You don't need that encouragement to make restrictions with new moons. Abai said it is necessary. You still have to include the new moon of Nisan, because what if it was a 30-day month? So in that case, if the month of Adar is 30 days long, fasting on the 30th day would be prohibited. only because it is the day preceding the new moon, not because it's follows the 28th of Adar. Now, in the usually, just as this is a good example, this year we just observed the first of Nisan. First of Nisan is almost, I mean, I think it's always a one-day Rosh Chodesh. You don't have, which means Adar is never going to be a 30-day month. It's going to be 29 days, and then the 30th day is the first day of the new month. But you have to remember that at this time, well, actually, by the time of the Talmud, the calendar was automatic. They had the calculations were fixed, which is a pretty amazing mathematical feat. But originally, the new moon was declared by a court. And so even though now, according to our calculations, the month of Adar would only be a 29-day month, and Nisan would always start 30 days after the previous month. In a system where you're waiting as a court for somebody to come and give testimony that you saw the new moon, it's possible that you could end up actually with a 30-day month, because it depends on when the person shows up. They would declare the new moon at that moment. So it's possible that you could have a 30-day month. And if the month of Adar is 30 days long, fasting on the 30th day would be prohibited, only because it is the day preceding the new moon. The confusion I had here is we had just learned that that wasn't true for holidays such as Rosh Chodesh. But in this case, they're saying that is the reason why you would not be able to fast or eulogize on the 29th day. No, on the day preceding the first day of Nisan, because the 29th you would fast because of the 28th, that's the day after, according to Rabbi Yossi, and on the 30th day you would fast the day before the new moon. So and that's why they have to tell us that this festive period is from the new moon, the first day of Nisan, through the 8th, because they want to teach us that, you should also refrain from fasting and eulogizing on the day before the new moon, which in this case would be the 30th, not the 29th. Rav Ashi Amar, afilu tema lechodesh haser. He says you could even work this answer out if it was a regular chodesh haser is a 29-day month. Kol shalacharav b'ta'anit asur behesped mutar. So he says, even in the deficient month of 29 days, the inclusion of the new moon of Nisan can still be explained as to why you have to be told this festive period is from the 1st to the 8th of Nisan. The reason is that with regard to all days that follow the dates listed in Megillat Ta'anit, fasting is prohibited, but eulogizing is permitted. So here he just pointed out that there's a distinction. Some of the days in the Megillat Ta'anit, some of those festive days, well, all of them, fasting is prohibited, but some of them you could eulogize on, not all of them. In this case, he says, the 29th of Adar is positioned between two commemorative holidays. You've got the one we just learned about, this day when the Jews were able to win the ability to study Torah and observe Shabbat and do Brit Milah, the 28th, and the Rosh Chodesh, which is a holiday. So because the 29th is right in between 2 days of holidays, it became like Asuhu Kayom Tov Atzmo. They made it as if it was a holiday unto itself. Filu behesped nam yasur. And you couldn't even eulogize. You certainly wouldn't fast on this in-between day, but you don't even eulogize because they made it into a kind of its own holiday as a bridge. And then we continue. Amar Mar. Okay, go back to a passage in the Mishnah. Mitmanya Be ve'ad sof mo'ada itotav chaga deshvuaya de la lemispat. From the 8th of Nisan, we're back to this period again, this mini holiday period, until the end of the festival of Passover, the festival of Shavuot was restored, and it was decreed not to eulogize during this period, which means not eulogizing nor fasting. So the Gemara now asks the question, Lama li lemeimar mitmanya be? Why do you have to say from the 8th to the end of the festival of Passover? Because he just did a double dip. He said from the 1st to the 8th is one of these mini holidays, festive days, and now you're saying from the 8th of Nisan. Well, it says we know that we know from the previous comment. Why do you have to tell us from the 8th of Nisan? You should say, let the Tana say, ut manya. No, lema mitisha be. Same. Tell us from the 9th. Just tell us from the 9th of Nisan, and because already utmanya gufe asur, that the day of the 8th was already forbidden from fasting and eulogizing. Dehavla yoma de itokam be tamida, because that was the time when we were celebrating the reestablishment of the daily offering. Kevan de ilu mikla le milta uvatline leshiva. So we have our answer here, according to the Gemara, is this: well, what if something happens, a calamitous event happens, and they canceled the 7 days commemorating the establishment of the daily offering? Right, and we're going to find out. We're going to see a real life example in a moment. A pogrom occurred during those first 8 days. Well, then we're not going to be celebrating anymore. We're going to say, no, forget it. We're done with those celebrations. Let's just, so therefore you protect the 8th day itself because it's the first day on which the festival of the celebratory period, when the festival of Shavuot was restored to the 6th of Sivan, which is the day we celebrate today, 50 days after the second day of Pesach. Since this date is not merely the last of a series for the daily offering, but it also commemorates the restoration of Shavuot, it's not affected by the cancellation of the previous 7 days. Okay, wait a minute. So now, Hashta, the Gemara is going to note, Hashta de atet lahachi. Now that you've arrived at this conclusion about losing out certain celebratory days, that these things were very fluid, these holidays. Good things happen, bad things may have happened on the same days, and then you canceled out the holidays. Esrim v'tisha nami, you should say the same thing about the 29th. Kivan de ilu mikla milta uvaline le esrim utmanya, esrim v'tisha gufe asur. You could say, since if a calamitous event happened and they canceled the commemoration of the 28th of Adar, nevertheless, the 29th day itself will remain prohibited, as it is the first day. Actually, it's not the first day, but it's the day before the first day on which the daily offering was established. Itmar, it's stated, Rav Chia bar Asi amar Rav, halacha k'Rabbi Yossi, u'Shmuel amar halacha k'Rabbi Meir. Now we have a dispute among the Amoraim, in which each Amora, or Talmudic sage, chooses a Tanaitic sage from the Mishnah's period to follow. According to Rav Chia bar Asi, it was Rav's opinion, one of the early major Amoraim, the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, that with regard to all the days mentioned in Megillat Tanit on which eulogizing is prohibited, it's likewise prohibited to eulogize on the day before and the day after. Shmuel, however, had a different. He followed Rabbi Meir, which it wasn't in the Mishnah, it wasn't referred to as Rabbi Meir's opinion. It was the unattributed Mishnah. But according to Shmuel, it was Rabbi Meir's opinion. And in that opinion was, you're prohibited to eulogize the day before, but it is permitted to eulogize the day after. So now we have a question though about Shmuel's opinion. Umiya Mar Shmuel Hachi. Did Shmuel actually say that he holds like Rebbe Meir? Because Vahatanya, it's taught in the Baraita, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, another early sage, Omer, Uma Talmud Lomar Bahon Shtei Pa'amim. Why does what is the meaning in Megillat when Megillat Tanit states on these days it was stated twice in the phrases not to eulogize on them and not to fast on them. This phrase is repeated to say to you that fasting and eulogizing on these days themselves is prohibited. He was reading very literally. Behon, on these days, not on the day before, not on the day after, on these days, is prohibited. But only the days themselves. But on the day before, the day following, you could declare a fast and you could eulogize. And Shmuel said it was his opinion that the halacha Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Wait a minute. A minute ago, you said he followed the unattributed opinion, which he said was Rebbe Meir. And Rebbe Meir's opinion is that you could eulogize or fast on the day following these festive days, but you can't do it the day before. Here, Shimon ben Gamliel says you don't need to, you're only restricted from fasting and eulogizing on the day itself, even of these Megillat Tanit celebration days. And Shmuel says, and the halacha follows Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Seems to be a contradiction. Me'ikara savar kevan de lekatana de mekel keRabbi Meir amar halacha keRabbi Meir. So initially Shmuel was looking for the liberal opinion. He was looking for the most liberal view he could find among the previous generation of scholars. And he thought, Rabbi Meir had the more lenient view that you could restrict fasting and eulogizing on the day before, but not on the day after, compared to Rabbi Yossi, who held before and after. You were restricted, as well as the holiday itself. But when he heard that Shimon ben Gamliel is also a major opinion, in fact, by the title Rabban, he was the head of the Sanhedrin, that was even more lenient. He said, okay, I'm going with Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Similarly, there was a sage known as Bali, Steinsaltz tells us it was an Amorah of the third generation in the land of Israel. But Bali said that Chiva bar Abba said that Rabbi Yochanan said the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. The Gemara relates that Rabbi Chiya bar Abba said to Bali, I'll explain this ruling to you. When Rabbi Yochanan said the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, he was not referring to every situation. Rather, he spoke specifically with regard to the day before those dates concerning which Megillat Tanit said fasting is prohibited. However, with regard to those days on which it is prohibited to eulogize as well, of course, fasting, he didn't rule in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, as Rabbi Yochanan maintains that eulogizing on the following day is permitted. Ki amar Rabbi Yochanan halacha ke Rabbi Yossi adla lehit ana. Only in regard with fasting, but not eulogizing. So there you have this distinction once again between restrictions on fasting and restrictions on eulogizing. Days on which we were restricted from eulogizing, also you're restricted from fasting, but there were some days on which you were restricted from fasting, but you could eulogize. Now we have the question about Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, did he really agree with this? Rabbi Yochanan, halacha kistam mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan has an opinion, a general principle, that he holds that the halacha follows the unattributed opinion in the Mishnah, which we have before attributed to Rabbi Meir. Now he's saying it's Rabbi Yossi, who was mentioned seems to be, he was mentioned because he was the minority view, and that if it's unattributed, it's probably the majority view. Even if Rabbi Meir held it, it was probably held by the majority of people. Utnan, afal pi she'amru makdimin velo mechirin mutarim behesped v'ta'anit. As we learned in the Mishnah, although the sages said with regard to the reading of the scroll of Esther, now we're going off to a side topic. This is going to get a little confusing. We'll try to figure this one out. Now we're moving into a different case to show that Rabbi Yochanan holds by the unattributed Mishnah. Okay, here's the case. In the case of reading the scroll of Esther, one may read it earlier, but one may not read it later than Purim. As the sages decreed that in certain places, one may read the scroll of Esther on the 11th, the 12th, or the 13th of Adar. Nevertheless, it's permitted to eulogize and fast on these days. So here you have a situation, and the notes here explained that sometimes because Monday and Thursday were market days, the custom would be to read the book of Esther so that more than the usual number of people could hear it, right? It has to be read from a scroll. They would read it on Monday or Thursday on the market days, even though Purim itself fell on a different day than the market day. And here we're going to see some of these situations. When does this ruling apply? And eventually we'll get back to Rabbi Yochanan and the unattributed Mishnah case. But first we have to hear this out. So the Gemara clarifies, when does the ruling apply? If we say that it applies to those in walled cities who normally read the scroll on the 15th of Adar, right? South Bend, we read it on the 14th, so does most of the world. But in Jerusalem, you read it on the 15th. And yet this year, they read it on the 14th, a day on which they normally are permitted to fast and eulogize. But that can't be the case, because are they permitted to fast and eulogize at all on these days, right? Because the 14th day is Purim is also, right? Purim is the 14th, Shushan Purim is the 15th. So if you say, wait a minute, oh, they're reading it on the 15th, does that mean they can eulogize or fast if they wanted to? Let's say if you're in Jerusalem on the 14th, that doesn't make sense, because isn't it written in Megillat Tanit, Aktiv b'Megillat Tanit, Yom 14 Yom, v'Yom 15 bo, Yomei Puria Inun. These are days of Purim. Dila lemispad bahon. You are not permitted to eulogize, and again, obviously not allowed to fast on these 2 days. So why'd you have to tell us that you can about this whole thing if you don't read it on the right day, or if you don't read on the exact day that you might be permitted to eulogize or fast on a day that you're reading the book of Esther? So Rava said, Rava said, since these days are already mentioned in the Bible, right? Book of Esther talks about the 14th and the 15th, 14th being Purim, 15th being the day in Shushan, and later all walled cities from the time of Joshua. It is necessary to state this halacha in Megillat Tanit only to prohibit those living in these walled cities from fasting and eulogizing on this date, the 14th, and those living in non-walled cities from fasting and eulogizing on this date, the 15th. So those 2 days are prohibited for this. But we're going to get now to these other days. Ve'ela b'nei arbei sar v'ka karei le bitlei sar yom nikanoru. So now we're going to run into some kind of some confusion. So if Purim fell on the 14th of Adar, Purim falls on Friday, and you say, but because Thursday on the 13th of Adar is a day when many people are coming to town because of the market days, you can read the book of Esther on the 13th. But you can also, but this is a day that you can also fast if you need to, or eulogize if necessary. But we're gonna run into a problem because, by the way, the 13th happens to be a festive day under, according to Megillat Tanit. It's Nicanor's day. We'll learn about that in a moment. Rather, ve'ela b'nei arbesar v'kakare le betresar. Okay. What about if it's Wednesday? Purim falls on Wednesday, 14th of Adar, and you say let's move the reading of Esther up 2 days to Monday, so more people can hear the book. But even though we're reading the book of Esther on that Monday, it is a day that you could eulogize. Wait, we got a problem on that day too, because the 12th of Adar is a commemorative day. It's called Trajan's Day. We'll learn about that in a moment. Okay. Ella, lav deka karule bechad v'chadesar v'katane mutar behesbe utanit. Rather, isn't the Mishnah referring to a case where they read the scroll of Esther on the 11th of Adar? And nevertheless, that Mishnah teaches that it is permitted to eulogize and fast on this day, despite the fact that it is the day before Trajan's Day, right? Because again, Trajan's Day is a rabbinic commemorative day. In the book of Megillat Tanit, we learned that the days before these rabbinic commemorative days, you are also forbidden from eulogizing and fasting. And maybe that's why they're teaching it this way, so that you could end up reading on the 11th. Let's see why you would do that. If Sunday was the 14th, Saturday was the 13th, Friday was the 12th, Thursday, you would write. So the holiday is on Sunday, the 14th, but you end up reading the book of Esther on that Thursday, the 11th. And on that day, you could, aren't they teaching us that, you know what, even though it's Trajan's Day was the day after, the 12th of Adar, what we're teaching you is that on the 11th day, you're permitted to eulogize and fast. Is that the case? So this is the opinion in the opinion in this unattributed Mishnah, that again, the day before, is not in accordance with that of Rabbi Yossi, which means, because again, the Rabbi Yossi holds, well, a minute ago we were told that Rabbi Yochanan held by like Rabbi Yossi. Now we're being told that he holds by the unattributed Mishnah, which is you're permitted to eulogize and fast the day before. Well, let's see. The opinion is in this unattributed Mishnah is not in accordance with that of Rabbi Yossi, which means that there's a contradiction between the two statements of Rabbi Yochanan. Because the opinion of the unattributed Mishnah said the unattributed Mishnah states you don't fast the day before, you can fast the day after. Okay, so I'm a little bit lost here. Because the unattributed Mishnah should have said, all right, we'll have to check that out, because that seems to be a contradiction. Not only a contradiction for Rabbi Yochanan, but it's a contradiction of what we just learned. The unattributed Mishnah says you don't fast, you don't eulogize or fast on the day before Trajan's Day. Oh, no, I get it. The unattributed Mishnah up here, which says that you're permitted to fast on the day before, on these days when you're reading the scroll of Esther, not on the day before, not on the day of Purim, but on these market days, you're permitted to read the book, even though you're also permitted to eulogize and fast. That's the unattributed Mishnah in this case regarding reading the Megillah. But Rabbi Yochanan is also on record as saying that he follows Rabbi Yossi, who said that Rabbi Yossi stated directly that you do not read it before or after these commemorative holidays. So if Rabbi Yochanan follows the unattributed Mishnah in all cases, then that seems to be a contradiction with Rabbi Yossi in the case of the day before one of these Megillat Ta'anit commemorative days. Okay. Now the Gemara is going to work everything out. Lo. B'nei arba'a asar v'ka karulei b'treisar. No, the Mishnah is actually referring to those who normally read on the 14th, but who read it that year on the 12th of Adar. Okay, and the 12th of Adar was Trajan's Day. With regard to that which you said, that it is Trajan's Day, Yom Turianus, Gufe Batule Vat Luhu. You know what? They actually canceled out Trajan's Day. Once upon a time, yeah, we observed it. It was a commemorative day, but they annulled that day and it's no longer celebrated. Why? Because the concern up above, tragedy happened on the same day that they were celebrating Trajan's Day. And what the tragedy was, there were these two guys, Shemaiah and Achia, who were killed on that day. And Rav Nachman, because of the death of these two individuals, he decreed a fast on the 12th of Adar. The sages said to him, wait a minute, it's Trajan's Day. But he, Yom Turianios Gufe Batalu Bat Luhu. So first, we can check out the background here. Shemai and Achia, we don't know who they are, according to Steinsaltz. They could have been part of the martyrs of Lod, which is talked about in another part of the Talmud, Bava Batra. This was, in that place, it was a pair of brothers who accepted responsibility for the murder of Caesar's daughter in Lod, in a false confession to spare the rest of their inhabitants for death. So they were martyrs, if they're the same guys. These were two martyrs who saved the Jewish community by their willingness to die. And we're going to see that in a moment. It's very similar to the whole Trajan Day origin. And we may as well read this here too. The sages said to him, "It's Trajan's Day. Rav Nachman, you can't declare a Tanit." And it says here, there's a dispute between the early authorities with regard to the halakha that Megillat Ta'anit has been rescinded, and that all the dates listed there are like regular dates, apart from Hanukkah and Purim. Some maintain that Megillat Ta'anit, all of these dates, what we've been talking about, the 8 days we were celebrating the restoration of the Tamid sacrifice, from the 8th to the end of Pesach, celebrating the return of Shavuot to its proper time. All of these, the Trajan's Day, Nicanor's Day, all these days have been canceled, except for Hanukkah and Purim. But some maintain that it's only canceled with regard to an individual fast performed in private. A fast of this kind may be performed on the days enumerated in Megillat Ta'anit. However, a communal fast can't be declared on those days. The Ravid bases his ruling on the fact that Rav Nachman justified his decree of a fast on the 12th of Adar, not because Megillat Ta'anit had been canceled, all these festivals in the Megillah, but because Shammai and Achia were killed on that particular days. Conversely, other authorities reject this proof, claiming that Rav Nachman merely wanted to provide a more specific reason for fasting on this day. Okay. So they were killed on this day. It was a very sad day. Rav Nachman said, you know what? We're done with celebrating Trajan's Day. We're now going to turn it into a fast day to remember these martyrs. the Gemara then asked, "V'tepukle dehava leyom shalifnei Nicanor." And let him derive that fasting on the 12th is prohibited in any case. Yeah, because because it's the day before Nicanor's day, right? Didn't we just learn this? That we just learned that even though the 29th, even though the 28th used to be a mini holiday, but it was canceled. The 29th should still be restricted regarding fasting and eulogizing because it's the day before Rosh Chodesh, or the day before this 1 to 8 mini festive day. So the same thing here. Nicanor's day is the 13th, so you should still that fasting is prohibited because of Nicanor's day, despite the fact that these two men were killed. But Rav Ashi said now that with regard to Trajan's day itself, they annulled it. Will we then arise and issue a decree not to fast on the date due to the following day, Nicanor's day? Which I understand him to be saying, wait a minute, we canceled the day not because the day doesn't hold anymore, but because a tragedy occurred on this day. And therefore, we were mourning on this day. I mean, it's a reason for mourning. So therefore, now you're going to say that because there's a reason to mourn on this day, you're going to say, well, but it's the day before Nicanor's day, and according to the opinion in the Mishnah on both Rabbi Meir and the unattributed Mishnah and Rabbi Yossi, both agree the day before one of these Megillat Ta'anit commemorative days, you don't fast. So you're gonna say that's the reason we should do it when there was a reason to annul Trajan's day because of a tragedy? I think that's what he's saying. Now we figure out. Now we got to learn out. We've been talking about these two holidays. What were they? So you have a little story here. My Nicanor umay Torianos. The Tanya Nicanor echad mi iparche Yevanim haya. Nicanor was one of the generals in the Greek army, and each and every day he would wave his hand over Judea and Jerusalem and say, "When will this city fall into my hands and I shall trample it?" When the Hashmoneans and the Maccabees defeated the Greeks, kitzatzu bahonot yadav v'raglav utla'um b'sha'arei Yerushalayim. Not very how should I say, kind of a rough guys on the Hasmoneans, among the Hasmoneans as well as the Greeks. When they emerged victorious, the Hasmoneans, they killed Nicanor, they cut off his thumbs and his toes, and they hung him on the gates of Jerusalem, saying, "The mouth that spoke with pride and the hands that waved over Jerusalem, they may vengeance be taken against them." I think they cut off his head too. No, I didn't say that. Okay. And this occurred on the 13th of Adar. Now, just a point of reference, the Nicanor here, there's two Nicanors that we talk about. This one was a Greek guy. He's a bad guy. There was another Nicanor, Jewish guy, for whom the Nicanor gates in Jerusalem around the city, or around the temple actually, was named for. And that had to be with the guy who paid for those gates and risked his life because he was on a boat bringing them to Israel. They were made, I forget exactly where they were made, but they were made somewhere very expensive, very fancy doors. And he had them brought to Jerusalem, and he risked his life to save them when the ship went down. And eventually, miraculously, the two doors showed up on shore. And so in honor of his sacrifice, willing to sacrifice himself, they named the gates after him. But that's a different Nicanor. So there was a good Nicanor, but this is the bad Nicanor. And defeating him was a day of celebration. What about Trajan's day? Okay, Amru, K'shebikesh Turianos laharog et Lulianos ufapus achiv beludkia, Amar lahem Im me'imo shel Hananya, Mishael, v'Azariah atem yavo Elohechem yatzil etchem miyadi kederech shehitzil et Hananya, Mishael, v'Azariah miyad Nebuchadnezzar. Trajan was the Roman leader, bad guy, bad person, evil person, and according to this story, he was going to kill two leaders. Notice all these Jews, the good Nicanor, but also these two guys, Lulianos and Papos. These are two Jews, but they do not have Hebrew names. So this is a sign of the assimilation of the Jews at this time. He said to them, if you're from the nation of Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, right? These are three guys in the book of Daniel who are saved. Just as God saved these three from Nebuchadnezzar when he threw them into a fiery pit and the angel saved them, you should, let him save you too. Lulianos and Papos said to him, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, Tzadikim, Gemurim Hayam. They were righteous people. Uri'in hayu leasot lehem nes, and thus deserving to have a miracle and be saved. Unebuchadnezzar melech hagun haya. Okay, now, I don't know if people at the time of Nebuchadnezzar felt this way, but he was a legitimate. Oh, they're translated hagun. Usually, hagun means fair or honest, but here in this case, it makes more sense to translate it this way. He was a legitimate king. So they're taunting Trajan. He was a powerful guy, and so therefore he was a real king. And therefore it's fitting that a nace should be performed through him because he was an important guy. But you, Trajan, you wicked person, you're not. You're a commoner. You're not a royalty. You're not part of royalty. And it's not worthy for a miracle to occur, not through you, but against you, to defeat you. You're nobody. You're a nobody, buddy. It's a big deal for God to maybe create a miracle through a real king, powerful king. That's a big deal. But you're nobody. Who cares if God's not gonna waste miracles on you. And we are not wholly righteous, so therefore we, in some way, are deserving of death. God has a lot of different ways to kill people. God has many beasts, in this case bears and lions, but there are many beasts in this world who God can use at God's disposal to kill us because we are in some way worthy of death. A very fatalistic outlook. Ella lo misaranu hakadosh baruch hu biyadcha ella she'atir li para damenu miyadcha. Instead, the Holy One, blessed be He, placed us into your hands only so that He will avenge our blood in the future. So we're deserving of death, but you know what, buddy? You are too. And you can kill us because that's our fate in life. But by doing it this way and by having blood on your hands, now there's justification to destroy you. Afal pichem haragan miyad. So Trajan was unmoved. He was a bad guy. I don't care. Kill you anyway. Amru lo zazu misham ad sheba'u diyofle meromi ufatsu et mocho b'mizri. It is said that they had not moved from the place of execution when two officials, Diofle, okay, again, this is a Greek borrowed word, arrived from Rome with permission to remove Trajan from power, and they split his skull with clubs. Okay, so he got it too. This was divine retribution, and therefore they celebrated that day. Even though these two men died, because they stood up for themselves, the Jewish people, and Trajan was destroyed. this day was considered a commemorative day. Okay, we're finishing up here. Here's the end of the parak, the chapter. Ein gozrin ta'anit ala tzibur batchila b'chamishi. One may not decree a fast on the community starting on a Thursday, so as not to cause prices to rise. Remember, that's because people will start running to the market to load up on food for the end of the fast, as well as Friday for Shabbat. And it'll cause literally a run on the market, and cause prices to go up. Furthermore, ein gozrin tanit b'roshei chodashim. One may not decree a fast on new moons, or on Hanukkah, or on Purim. V'kama havya hatchala, Rav Acha amar shalosh, Rabbi Asi amar achat. But if you remember, it did tell us that if remember, these are series of fasts that we're talking about, the 3, and the 7. But if you started that sequencing of fasts, and one of them happened to fall during Hanukkah or on Purim or on a new moon, you don't stop the sequencing of fasting. And how many fasts are considered a beginning? He says here that according to Rambam, Maimonides, that this beginning does not refer to the start of a cycle of fasts, but to the beginning of the fast day itself. It is possible that he explains the mention of 1 and 3 in the Gemara is referring not to the number of fasts, but to the number of hours. Okay, the way it seems here is that if one fasted 3 fasts, let's say you started the sequencing, it was the winter, no rain when it's supposed to be coming, Hanukkah, you start this sequencing of fasts. If you fast for 3 of them, and the no rain comes, and then you say, okay, another 3-day fast, a Monday, Thursday, Monday fast, and one of those 3 days happens to fall on Hanukkah or during Hanukkah, you still keep the fast up because you did your first 3. Now, Rabbi Yassi says even if one fasted 1 fast before it, so even at the very beginning of the sequencing, the first series of 3 fasts, if you fasted one of those days and then that Thursday, you started on Monday, and that Thursday was Hanukkah, or you were doing it the same thing with Purim, that Thursday happened to be Purim, you fast anyway, because you've started the sequence, you started the series. Amar Rav Yehuda Marav, zo divrei Rabbi Meir, she'amar mishum Rabban Gamliel. This is a statement of Rabbi Meir, who said it in the name of Rabban Gamliel. Both of these are Tanaim, the rabbis of the period of the Mishnah. Aval Hachamim orim mitaneh umashlim. If a communal fast occurs on one of these days, according to the majority, the rabbis, one must fast and complete the fast until nightfall. Oh, that's right, because we also learned that when you do fast on a festive day, if you have to fast, you don't necessarily have to complete the fast. The rabbis are saying, if a communal fast occurs on one of these days, you fast until nightfall. Mar Zutra taught in the name of Rav Huna, halacha mitaneh umashlim. The practical halacha is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis that one fasts and completes his fast until nightfall. And Hadran alach seder ta'aniyot ketzad. We have finished. We'll return to you, God willing, one day, the order of ta'aniyot ketzad. That's chapter 2, and that's what we will. I don't know if we'll return in the near future, but we will certainly keep on going to chapter 3, and we will do that. We will do that starting right after Pesach. So I'll send the note out in a couple of weeks. No need to send it out right now. We're all getting ready for Pesach. And then right after Pesach, sometime in the beginning of April, I forgot what it is. I think it's the second Sunday in April, we will return to our Talmud studies. I am going to finish the tractate myself before Pesach. So those of you who want to get out of fasting if you're a firstborn. And so therefore participate in a siyum, which obligates you to eat because that is a festive occurrence, can do so on it'll be not the day before Pesach this year, it'll be on the Thursday before Pesach, because Pesach starts Saturday night. But I will complete it, and then but we'll keep going, and we'll finish it sometime this summer, early summer, I hope. We've got what do we got? 13 more, or 13, I think 13 more dapim. So should take it, yeah, sometime in the summer. And so we'll see you then. Take care.